can you actually move the needle and progress your company or your function towards innovation and towards significant growth, even in the face of economic headwinds or financial constraint? That's the question we're going to attempt to answer today. And we're going to dig in like we've done in the last episode. We're going to start with a question and not have a strong answer. In fact, Jess and I were debating it, and we had to stop talking before the call or before I hit record because I don't want to hear the rest of it. It's going to be a bit of an unknown. But join us as we explore growth and capability, even when you don't have the money to do it. So let's go ahead and roll the intro.
This is Plays Well with Others. Thanks for listening.
All right. So here we are. I asked the question earlier, can you actually provide additional value or grow in innovation when you're economically or financially constrained? And Jess, you started with another sentence and I cut you off before we hit record so that we can do this live. So join us today, won't you?
Well, I don't like the way the question's phrased because you don't want to say no to that particular question for a lot of reasons. One, because it's potentially not good for you professionally, but even more than that, it's not good for your mental health, for your team's, morale for you to say no to that question. So I think the question is maybe better, or how you want to address the question is, how do you make progress in tough economic times? Everybody's experiencing it. The entire country is experiencing tough economic times right now. And a lot of companies are maybe tightening up on things, but they don't want to lose momentum forward when they have good ideas or opportunities for, innovation, or opportunities to, grow their market share or organic growth within their current market. How do you push yourself forward without burning yourself out, taking steps that are not fiscally responsible, or, putting your team under undue strain by still trying to progress when you don't technically have the budget to put towards innovation?
Right. And I like the way you said that earlier, was nobody needs to or nobody wants to take the negative on that question.
Nobody wants to say no to that. Nobody wants to be the one who's like, no, it's not possible.
I think there's some color there, right? So in both I look at it differently as personal and professional. So in both realms, you're kind of looking at, what do I need to say no to so that I can say yes to the things that are really valuable? And we've talked about this in past episodes. You need to be saying no to like a dozen things a day so that you can say yes to the one thing that really does work. Personally, if that's like a hobby that makes you want to get up in the morning, or your family or something like that, or professionally.
I love how you say that dismissively. Or your family, I guess. I don't know.
Whatever. Or professionally, like, say no to the good idea fairy, because there's always those ideas that come out of the woodwork as noise, and this is gonna change our lives. Probably won't.
And turns out it's 0.1% of like the one thing that you do that's actually going to be useful for that.
Right.
But
right.
You honestly hit the nail on the head, like directly into that. You couldn't have saved the most important point for later. Like literally, I think this is the most important thing. Saying no is the most important thing right now. And that's not saying no to anything. That's saying no to everything except for the right thing. Thinking really, really critically about, where should you invest? What are the things that are actually going to be good for the current market that you're in? And really taking the time to step back and not, jump at the next new thing, the shiny, pretty thing that you're looking at, and really thinking through, like, what's my company ready for? I had a great meeting today with a lot of the leaders in my company that, we talked about some things that are good ideas, but there's other things that we already have enough understanding and enough buy-in in the company, as well as the technical understanding of how to implement them, that those are better investments for us right now, even though this other thing is shiny and pretty and we want it. So saying no is one of the most important things right now. Not saying no to everything, but saying no to everything except for the right thing.
I was going to quote a book, and it doesn't appear to be sitting on my desk, but there's a book entitled The Manager's Handbook that really encapsulates, which if you don't have it, it's on Amazon. It's a quick read. I read it in like 3 mornings, but there's a whole chapter on setting goals or setting roadmaps. And the way that the author put it was, it's much easier to add things to your plate later than it is to take away from your plate. Because when you take things off, and I've had leaders that have approached things, and I've approached it this way too, set these lofty goals and then shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll still land among the stars. Either way, you're still suffocating in the darkness of space. And that's kind of how
Not
it
to mention the
feels.
fact that the stars are further away than the moon, but whatever.
Sheer
Pesky
astrophysics,
facts out of the way.
orbital mechanics don't often fit on a needlepoint pillow. But I do like that approach, because when you have to pull back from things, you set these big goals and then you miss them. You can say all day long that we set lofty goals and we accomplish a lot, but we set them with the understanding that we're not going to meet them. You say that all day long, but at the end of the day, it's like, I didn't
It's
make it.
demoralizing.
Yeah.
This is funny because I've actually had this argument with a leader before at a previous company that I worked at, where they constantly were setting incredibly lofty goals and then feeling like sad that they didn't accomplish as much. And I would have to kind of like reframe the conversation of, no, we hit, these milestones. And that was how I kind of partnered with this person, is I would set milestones, which for me were what you're talking about, Andrew, small incremental goals that you can achieve, you will achieve if you stay focused, and that you can take as a win for your division. And that actually helped us have a better relationship when I took his big lofty goals and broke them into milestones, that then we could, discuss the wins of our milestones and the achievements that we've done. So if you're struggling with a boss who does, massive lofty goals and doesn't necessarily have, great, maybe not a great plan for how to get there, or maybe that's just too difficult of a plan given the economic environment that we're existing in right now, reframing that conversation into achievable milestones that you can take as a win as you achieve them. Maybe that's an opportunity that you can use.
Well, it's the difference between vision and execution, which is, as we talk about the question of providing innovation, there's keeping the lights on, but then there's these lofty business goals, or these visionary ideals that people hold, or that, as an example, a lot of my work today is on focusing on moving the needle forward on data science and AI ML. Well,
Yeah.
in a constrained economic world, that's pretty challenging. But the reason that I'm in the seat I'm in is because I don't just stop at, oh, that's hard, I can't do that. It's, well, dang, that's hard. How do I do that? What would I need to do that? And then what would the result be? So you start out with this big vision, and this big vision may not be exactly as described. So using the example of AI, everybody's personality today is AI. Like, everybody's got something to say. Like, I would hazard to say that if you open your LinkedIn today, you can't make one full mouse scroll without finding at least one AI post, regardless of the qualifications or the certifications of the person. They're gonna have a comment, this post generated by AI, and I have to eat it because I did the same thing last week. But
I wasn't going to mention that I saw your AI post, but I did.
Well, it's interesting. That's a rabbit trail. I'll go off on it in a minute. But when somebody says, I want AI for all of these things and it's going to change our business, well, that may be true. But our job as the execution aspect, strategy and execution, is to take that and say, okay, well, 20% of that's AI. 40% of it is pure reporting, and another 40% is simple data governance. That little nugget of innovation is there with AI, but the rest of it is like table stakes, doing your craft well and presenting it in a way that you can see the vision, and maybe you actually hit the moon instead of floating off into space
instead of the nothing in between here and the moon.
there's a lot of empty in
So here
space.
so here's kind of a different perspective on this question. I actually find sometimes that having a smaller team or having a team with less maybe funding can sometimes have surprising innovative results, because you start to look at things from a different perspective. You don't look at it from the traditional perspective, how you've always done things before. You maybe go, well, how can we do this differently or better or cheaper or faster or more efficiently? And, there's that quote that I'm 100% going to mess up where, never underestimate that a small group of dedicated individuals can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. It's kind of not far from, true when it comes to companies tasking the remaining individuals there. Maybe if you've had a downsizing event, or maybe if you just have a smaller team, whatever that looks like, those individuals focusing towards kind of this shared goal and having a narrower focus instead of saying yes to everything like you might have when you had a ton of funding. Maybe you're saying no to a lot of things and giving yourself a narrower focus. I do think that puts you in an environment to have some really surprisingly innovative ideas. And I don't know. I do think that there's something to be said there for having a more creativity in times of less.
Well,
And that's
right. And
probably true for a lot of different circumstances as well.
well, yeah, no matter how you scale it works for you as an individual, which I have this conversation with my wife a lot. It's like a lot of what I do in my personal life is saying no to things so that I have the energy to do the things that I really need to do or really want to do. Because for
Yeah.
me, social interactions and things of, meeting new people and whatnot in person can be draining. So it's like,
Yeah.
I've got this opportunity to meet people that are important for me, either because they're my family, they're my friends, or they're important to my career or
You're
what
not
have
going to
you.
spend your social capital willy-nilly. You're going to focus it where it's really
Right.
important for you to invest it.
So why wouldn't you do that for your business if you have an opportunity to do something really earth-shattering, whether that means increasing your revenue by 5x, let's say hypothetically. If I had that, then, I wouldn't tell you. But
You'll
if
tell
you
me later though, offline.
yeah. Use this one trick, this one simple trick to get rich quick. Doctors hate me. But if you had that in your back pocket, would you set it on a roadmap along with 30 other things that are all
No,
there to do
it's the
stuff?
only thing that matters.
Right. So that's where we get in this weird habit, especially when you're like at enterprise scale, of doing the things every day the same way. We build a process and we follow the process. And
Yeah.
I'm not denigrating the process, but when you get in the habit of following the process so much, you miss the nuance of, oh no, that's a big deal. We need to scrap the rest of this mess and switch over to this. And from practicality, I find often that shows itself when I get completely and utterly burnt out, when I've been going back to back meetings all day, every day for like a week and a half, and I've still got actual deliverables that need to happen. Then at some point, I get so far up against the wall of I got to get these deliverables out or I'm going to get canned, that I have to say, oh, well, actually, none of these meetings were as important as these deliverables. I just didn't want to have to make that decision until I absolutely couldn't. And so then
Yeah.
it's cancel all the meetings, forget all this. Hey, sorry, Jess, I'm going to need you to cover this because otherwise I'm not going to be here next week. And why don't we approach project planning that way, or initiative planning, or budgeting? Because we know that there will be noise. We know it's coming, but we don't ever deal with it well.
And I disagree. I think there are a lot of scenarios where this is handled incredibly well, and I've seen it handled well at companies I've worked at. I think the part that does escape us is the excitement over the new thing can offset us from the larger vision. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's almost like it's not that we're not unaware of what the important thing is, it's that we can get distracted from it. And so having a dedicated person who's keeping people on track and who's pushing back, and that needs to be a leader, that has to be someone higher up in the organization who's like, actually guys, like I know that's exciting, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do this thing that's actually worth the investment. I think that's a lot of companies do well understand the thing that's going to make them the most money, but staying the path. There's I went to a training years ago, and the guy said stop starting and start finishing. And I love that phrase, and I wish I could remember who it was that gave the training so I could give him credit here, but I love that phrase and I use it a lot when I'm doing trainings internally with my different companies that I work for, because it's so true. It's so fun to start a new project and it's so hard to finish one. To dot all the I's, cross all the T's, make sure everyone's happy and close the project down. And it is the most rewarding thing ever to actually close the project, but it's so hard to get everyone on the same page and get all the things finished.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a quote that something to the effect of I'd rather have one focused average person or one focused individual versus a distracted genius. So
Yeah.
like if you look at it
I
like a
You're
bar or
not
like a
wrong. I mean,
line chart, you
genuinely
get
like
one
having
person that can put
there's,
left in front of right and right in front of
we've
left
all
over
met this
time.
guy. We've all worked with him, the
Eventually,
idea man. Oh, I think we're talking over each other. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Welcome to wonderful world of UDP. But this idea that as long as you can have the wherewithal to start the right thing and the patience and determination to continue it, eventually you'll fix it. Eventually you'll finish. But if you want
Yeah.
to start and stop and start and stop and start and stop a bunch of different things, then you'll never get one thing done and
Hmm.
you'll just kind of live down here in mediocre land.
Yeah. And I was going to say that, we've all worked with that guy who is the idea guy who has the great ideas, but zero follow through or ability to execute. And he tends to be somewhere in middle management. And we're never sure quite how he got there. But that is really the person who can throw a well laid plan into absolute chaos because they are always the one bringing the, well, what about this? Well, look at this new thing we need to do. And we need to think about this, or we have this idea, or we're going to do this. And having someone who has that dedicated follow through and who's willing to herd all the cats and get them all pointed one direction, they're incredibly valuable in an organization.
That's why I really appreciate the a well-tuned OKR cycle. So
Yeah.
doing OKRs is, you get some value out of it just by following the exercise, but in OKRs, objectives and key results, we've talked about them before. You can Google to find more because there's a whole bunch, but essentially,
Yeah.
what am I going to do and how am I going to do it and how am I going to measure it? But if you go through that process and you plan out for an entire year, it gets really squishy out towards Q4, when it's a year away. But if you say that at the end of 2023, these are the things that are important for me in the next year, and then you revisit those once a quarter or once a month or however long it is, and you say, okay, well, things have changed. We had attrition, people left, or we got new people. So now we've got new skills, different skills, or okay, suddenly the market changed on a dime and now Chat GPT is the president of the United States and things are different. You should be able to revisit those things and get them crunchier as you go along so that you're still keeping your eyes on the prize and you have something to point to. I always like to say you got a sign hung on the wall that says that's the important thing. It, does this thing you're asking me for service that important thing? And
Mhm.
usually the answer is no. Sometimes it's yes, and oh, there's a component to this I didn't even think about. But again, you can revisit on a regular basis and see how that provides value and see how you can increment towards a solution rather than waterfalling it out the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. We've strayed a little bit from the question, but I do think all of this points us towards an answer of, how do you move forward in tough economic times? I think what you just said is probably the best answer, right? You think long term about what's actually going to be successful for the company. You say no to things that don't fall within the parameters that you laid out for yourself. You stay the path, and then you make small incremental movements. You're not going to be able to do maybe the massive, huge thing that you would have done 4 years ago. So you make smaller movements towards it. But that also gives you the opportunity to, course correct as the market changes, or course correct as new people come, go, skills change, whatever that looks like, while still focused on a larger objective that's going to help move your company forward.
So let's make the soundbite then. So you, Jessica Agnew, you as a person, how do you move the needle forward with innovation and capability in the face of financial and economic constraints?
Honestly, that's it, right? I say no to things that aren't going to be needle movers for us, things that aren't going to actually help us achieve a longer term goal. We stay focused on them. We keep everyone focused and excited about the things that we want to achieve. And that shared purpose can drive innovation alone, but also keeping a open dialogue with the people around you, so that you're asking them to bring you thoughts and ideas, and you're asking them to engage in a solution. And then you try your best to make small incremental improvements and celebrate those wins with milestone victories as you move forward, to keep morale high across the division, but also to keep people excited about what they're trying to achieve. Progress updates to show them where they are on the path to where you want to get. Things like that, I think, can keep you excited, keep you innovating, and keep you moving forward.
So key theme from the product professional is stay focused. Stay focused on the right thing. For the technologist in me, my answer is a little bit
Yeah.
different.
All right,
And
Andrew Moore.
this is your life.
Give us your answer.
I think my answer is, it took me a long time to reach this answer, and it's been kind of a driving factor in my brain ever since. It just like rewired my brain chemistry. And instead of responding to things as that's hard or I can't do that, I respond first by asking myself, what would I need to do that? And sometimes the answer is 40 people in a tank. And sometimes the answer is, oh, well, I guess I could just have a contractor and a little extra time. That's what completely changed my perspective on leading and executing through adversity. Because most of the time, yeah, I mean, we know problems are hard. Everybody agrees they're hard. But you want the person driving the bus to be the person that says, I get they're hard, but this is what we could do. Maybe if we look at the problem a little bit differently, then we can shrink the scope into something that we can manage. Or maybe if we give ourselves a little extra time, we can accomplish as projected. Or if we don't have time and we can't shrink the problem, well, we need more money. Let me
Mhm.
have some additional contractors, some consultants, some additional FTEs. It really simplifies how I look at most problems. Most things are accomplishable if you simply look at the three levers you can have: time, money, and people.
Yeah. I have a story of a CISO I used to work with. I before he had started at the company I was at, I had worked with a previous CISO there, and they were, I don't want to say rigid because that's not fair, but they were very particular. And a lot of what they saw their job of as doing was, how do I prevent a security attack on our company, which is a good thing for a CISO to care about, obviously. But their approach to it was to say no unless you could convince them otherwise. And after they left and the new CISO came in, we were in a meeting and we were talking about something. And I looked at the CISO to ask them a question on, how do we move forward with this? How, can we do this, basically, is what I was asking. Can we do this thing? And I honestly was expecting him to shut me down until we could convince him we could do it safely. And instead, he said, let's figure out a path. And that was his approach to every conversation we brought to him is let's figure out a path. He never said no to things. He just helped you frame them and do them in such a way, gave you guardrails so that you could do the thing that you needed to do for your business in a successful way while remaining safe and compliant. And it was a learning experience for me and such a huge boon to my own personal growth to learn to look at things from that perspective of how do we get there? How do we find a path? And I think you just gave another, his way of doing it was much more looking at how do we do it safely? And you're looking at it, how do we do it in the time or the extent or the level that this person wants to do it? Or technologically, how do we find a solution that'll work? But it all kind of amounts to the same thing of you're not going into the room to say no to people. You're going into the room to help guide them to a path that'll get them to the successful place they want to end up.
I think I'm thinking of the same guy, but he also told me at one point that InfoSec, information security, is not always the first thing to be invested in a company. And it's usually the first thing to get cut. And he didn't ever want to be the guy that said no or blocked business progress because of security. Because in a growing product organization, you can often finance security at your own risk. And I mean finance by push it off later. We'll worry about that in 60 months.
Yeah.
But
his approach made him someone that people wanted to go to. And they made his philosophy that he explained to me was you want your way to be the fastest way. So they just come to you and do the right thing because that's the easier path. Because people are always going to go the easy path. So if you make your right way the easy path, they're going to come your way.
All right. So Jess and I both sort of directly answered the question. So we said at the beginning of the episode, nobody wants to say no to can you still innovate when things are tough? But what I think we've done over the last 30 minutes and some change is address a few different things that we do to rewire our brains to still deliver even when things are hard. And I don't think any of those are directly tied to suck it up and be better. Mostly they're real tactical things that we both do that help us get past the mental block or the roadblock to continue pushing forward and continue working on the right things, even though, they're not ideal. But if you've made it this far and you've made it into the second episode of our new format, I appreciate it. Glad to have you here. If you have any other questions or any other advice for how you continue to execute, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, doesn't matter. How do you continue to move the needle forward even when you don't have the best of support? How do you approach execution in a world that isn't necessarily investing in you day after day after day because we're in hunker down mode, so to speak?
Yeah.
Definitely look forward to hearing from you. Leave us a comment, rate and subscribe as always on your podcast platform of choice. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, hello, here's a wave so you see us on video. But as always, thanks for listening. I am Andrew Moore, joined by my co-host Jess Agnew, and this has been Plays Well with Others.